our council meeting. I would like to alter the order of business for a couple of items. First of all, to say that we have received acknowledgements from the Lord Provost of Glasgow and from the Police Scotland to acknowledge the letter of condolence that we sent to both these organisations. The second item is I shall receive the Commonwealth Games flag from the Vice Lord Lieutenant, Richard Callender. Okay, thank you.
Provost, on behalf of the Lord Lieutenant, I'm delighted to present you with this Commonwealth flag from Her Majesty the Queen. And I very much hope that you will arrange for it to be flown on Commonwealth Day next month as a symbol of the friendship between all the 54 countries that make up the Commonwealth family. I think it's particularly relevant this year as we are fortunate enough to be hosting the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow this year. Thank you.
I'm happy to accept the Commonwealth flag on behalf of the people of Midlothian and accept it as a gesture of friendship between nations throughout the Commonwealth. Thank you. Okay, we now begin council business proper. Do you have apologies?
Apology from Councillor Beattie, Provost.
Okay, in the order of business.
The order of business as published, Provost. A paper has been tabled in respect of item number 7 and follow papers have been issued in respect of item numbers 15 and 24 on the published agenda.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? If there are any crops up during our meeting, I'd be pleased to accept them. Thank you. The minutes of the meeting for approval, Midlothian Council, 17th of December 2013. Okay. For noting, Cabinet meeting of 19th of November, 2 meetings 19th of November and the 17th of December. Planning Committee, the 19th of November. General Purposes Committee, the 12th of November. Local Review Body, 26th of November. Performance Review and Scrutiny, 22nd of October, and 2 on the 27th of November. The Audit Committee, the 29th of October, and the Safer Communities Board on the 17th of September. Okay. There are no written questions for the Leader. So we move on to notices of motion 6A by Councillor Montgomery.
Thanks, Provost. I don't think it's not a contentious motion, so I'm not going to speak for too long on it. Professor Palmer already received Freeman of Midlothian, or the Freedom of Midlothian, a couple of years ago, and I think it was very well deserved, and it was supported by all parties at the time. Jeff is a very well-known character and person in the Pennacook and Scotland and the UK for a lot of the work that he's done, not just in the grain industry, but also in his work in racial equality, and that's really what he's concentrating on now. And I think it's not inappropriate that somebody whose ancestors were actually slaves in Jamaica came over here in 1955 when he was 14 years old, on his own on a ship from Jamaica via New York to London, and made his way in life through really very difficult circumstances. He played cricket for London schools, which they took the credit for, although he'd actually learned how to play cricket in Jamaica. But he took his first degree in 1964 in botany at Leicester University, and when he applied for his first job after that, just to show how times have changed, when he went to the brew, as we would call it then, when he told the interviewer that he had a degree, the guy thought he had a temperature and offered him a job as a park attendant or a potato peeler. But in 1964, Jeff he doesn't give up easy. He took a PhD at Heriot Watt in grain science, which led to him becoming a professor of grain at Heriot Watt University, and world renowned he was for that as well. But as I say, he's more now well known for his work in race relations. And, whatever you think of the honours system, and I've certainly got great reservations about it. It's not my first pick for a lot of things that we do. And certainly some of the people that receive honours, you just get them for just actually being there. Jeff's actually earned it. And as I say, for somebody whose ancestors were slaves to get a knighthood, I think it's quite a story in itself. He's got a book that was published. He's published a lot of different things, but the Enlightenment Abolished, it's called. And it's about Scotland's involvement in the slave trade, which is really a kind of hidden story about not just Scotland but also Great Britain involvement in the slave trade, and it's actually worth a read. So I've got great delight in actually moving just that we congratulate him, and if I could send a letter from the council to Jeff just congratulating him getting his knighthood, and if you ever meet him in the street, be prepared to put about an hour aside, because it's the man can talk, I can assure you, but he's a good lad and he's very well deserved, and I'm delighted to actually move this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett, would you like to say something?
Thanks, Provost. Adam obviously knows Professor Jeff Palmer a lot better than me because he studies in Pennicook, but the first time I met him was when he was getting the presentation here for the free man in Midlothian, which was interesting. I think the first free man in Midlothian was Nelson Mandela, so it was interesting that Jeff Palmer was. And following on for getting a presentation from Midlothian Council, they decided to make him a knight, and I would just like to formally second Adam's motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just very briefly, and I hope Adam's sitting down because I'm going to agree with everyone he just said. It's got to be about the first time that's happened. No, I think it is. We have to acknowledge that this is a great honour, whatever we think of the honour system itself. It is a great honour for Professor Palmer, for Pennicook and for Midlothian. Another example, Midlothian leading the way and sort of being first and honouring him with the freedom of Midlothian. But yeah, I think we just have to welcome this, and we'd certainly welcome any move to send a letter of congratulations as suggested by Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. That passed by acclamation. Thank you. Item 6B, it's a motion by Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be relatively brief. I mean, I think events have slightly overtaken us here, and I think if we could have a verbal slight amendment to the motion in front of us here, given that we've now received the flag, because the motion does talk about us arranging to receive that. So we have now received the flag. But the celebration and the flag for the Commonwealth really is just a marker of the occasion that we have this year, and the fact that Glasgow successfully winning the bid to host the Commonwealth Games, and we can all look forward to that later this year. We have further items on the agenda where we can talk in more detail around that, so I don't feel the need to particularly talk too much to this motion, but certainly welcome the fact that we're participating. Apparently 500 Commonwealth flags are due to raise on the 10th of March at marking Commonwealth Game, so it's appropriate that we in Midlothian join the other local authorities in commemorating the Commonwealth on the same day.
Councillor Montgomery, would you care to second that?
Yeah, I'll not say much either, Provost. I mean, I agree with what Owen said as well. It's not going to last for the rest of the meeting, I can assure you, right? Don't get too excited about it. But no, I mean, I think the Commonwealth Games, it's an opportunity to showcase Scotland, and I think Scotland will do the Commonwealth Games proud. I was fortunate enough to get down to London last year when the Olympics were on, or 2 years ago, when it was the Olympic football final, and just to see everybody going about enjoying themselves and relaxed, and people for all the different countries that were there. And I'm looking forward to these people all being welcomed in Scotland to hopefully a great Commonwealth Games, and hopefully a substantial number of medals for Scotland at it.
Thank you. That passed by acclaim. Thank you. Item 6C, a motion by Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Provost. I become aware just at the beginning of the year that Dalkeith and Moncton Colliery Brass Band had been appointed to play the part of Grimley Colliery on the stage production of Brass Stuff. And it was for one of the band members who I used to work beside at Moncton Hall, and obviously being former chairman of the NUM and secretary of the NUM, I was delighted that they've actually kept the name Moncton Hall Colliery and Dalkeith, and probably that's one of the reasons that, that they got the job, because as you're aware, the whole film is, the backdrop of the film is the miners' strike 30 years ago, and what effect it had on a colliery band. But there's a number of events taking place this year, and I know the colliery band's going to be playing at them. There's an event in Preston Pans on the 14th of March for a get-together for all the former strike committee that's still living, doing Preston Pans, and I know the brass bands are going to play at that. So I think it's fitting that the band, colliery band, one of the very few remaining, although Newton Grange band's still gone, they're no longer cried Lady Victoria Colliery. So really the band's over the moon that they're getting the chance to play at the King's Theatre. And I've got my tickets. I've got 2 tickets to go for the opening night, which I paid for. But anyhow, we wish them all the success, and I think it was a wee note for the council congratulating them and getting the position of playing at the King's.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Provost. Happy to second this motion. I've had a long association with the Dalkeith and Moncton Hall band, with my council, with my Dalkeith Festival hat on, and they've always been kind to us here in Midlothian and in Dalkeith in particular. They played at our Christmas lights and that they play at the Dalkeith Festival, so they do give a lot back to this community. So I'm really delighted about this. The only one thing that causes me some concern is the fact that the band is half made up of ladies, and the ladies will have to disguise themselves in this particular production. So like I've got tickets that I paid for, remember that, and I'm looking forward to seeing the production. Thank you.
Thank you. That passed by acclaim. Councillor Bryant.
I just wanted to say the dates of the performance is the 29th of April, 3rd of May, and I don't have my tickets yet.
Free or otherwise? That passed by acclaim. Thank you. Item 6D, a motion by Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. I hope we can carry on in this vein that we have started the meeting. I'm not going to go read through all the details in terms of the motion, but rather deal with the principles behind it. The expansion of nursery education does much to tackle the inequalities that are all too prevalent in Scottish society by putting the effort in where the best results can be achieved, and that is right at the start of the whole education process. Similarly, in the provision of childcare, help at the start again gives the best long-term results for the families which need the support. Going on to the meals provision for primaries 1 to 3, we're all well aware of the health inequalities in our communities. We've got life expectancy approaching Scandinavian levels in our leafy suburbs and third world standards in our less advantaged areas. This really should be something that has to be tackled. Free school meals from primary 1 to 3 are just a start in tackling the process of bad diets which lead to poor health, and it's a very worthwhile investment for the government to make and for the council. The council will note the support from all the institutions and organisations from the EIS, STUC, right down the list there, and I'm glad to propose this motion.
Councillor Constable.
I'm very happy to second the motion and to express my appreciation for the SNP government's announcement that families and young people will benefit from millions of pounds of additional funding supporting free school meals and expanding childcare provision. There's a huge amount of evidence which demonstrates the benefit of preschool nursery education to children, increasing confidence and self-esteem along with developing the child's social skills and interaction with other children as well as adults. As for the free school meals, there's overwhelming evidence that access to free school meals is of huge benefit to a child's education, improving concentration levels as well as educational attainment. Providing free school meals to all children actually improves help for children in poverty. More poor children and working families will now be eligible, and fewer children will be put off by worries that they will be singled out as being poor because they have a free school meal. These aren't my words, these are the words of a Child Poverty Action Group. Indeed, the policy supported by the CPAG, EIS, STUC, my own trade union Unison, Children in Scotland, Children First, Church of Scotland, Save the Children, etc., etc. Even the Labour group in Southwark, London, where the policy was first piloted, welcomed the provision of universal free school meals for primary children. So personally, I think it's shocking and surprising that the Labour group at Holyrood voted against the policy of free school meals for all children in primaries 1 to 3. And I hope that the Labour group in Midlothian Council will have more sense and decency and will support this motion.
Councillor Muirhead.
Despite the last contribution, I am going to maintain what we've had up to now and the discussions that we've had as regards to the kind of unanimity and agreement here. I think the only thing I would say about the motion is I think it's slightly premature, because I think I know that officers at the moment are working up try to determine what the preferred delivery model for the additional hours and things like that are. And it would only be at that point, I would guess, that we would be able to determine for certain that the funding that's going to be put forward here by the government is adequate to do what we need to do in Midlothian. Been here long enough in the tooth, been here long enough to know, and I'm not being party political here, because it applies to all governments, whether they be Scottish or UK, in the past, that when we get big announcements trailed like this, that it often is the case that the funding that's given isn't adequate to do what is required in every single area. So I would be a wee bit hesitant. I would have preferred this to have come forward at the tail end of next month's meeting, when perhaps that kind of level of information may be available, or the meeting beyond that. But we're certainly not in a position where we're going to oppose what are worthwhile moves.
Councillor Pottinger.
I've campaigned long and hard for free school meals. When I was the chair of the Scottish Local Government Forum Against Poverty, we had presentations from the Child Poverty Action Group who quoted the Scandinavian model of free school meals as beneficial to all and under the universal rules. We've had at that organisation, we had a hustings meeting, which included politicians from all parties who were invited to the hustings meeting. And at the time, the one that took that up mostly in the Scottish Parliament was Alex Neil and Tommy Sheridan, who took it forward as a Scottish kind of campaigning issue. And yes, Labour has been very much behind this. We also note that the UK government has announced it at the party conference seasons last year, and I think they gave the Liberals the credit to allowing them to announce that free school meals in England and Wales. And it's good to see it getting extended, and I'd like to see it further extended. Just with primaries 1, 2 and 3, I'd like to see it further extended in the future. But yes, I do welcome, the extra help to, shall we say, even the working poor that will benefit from a lot from this money. And I just really hope it is sustainable, and it's permanent.
Councillor Thompson.
Just very, very briefly, I wanted to acknowledge the points made by Councillor Muirhead and say that absolutely, I do agree with what he's saying there with regards to how the funding comes together. There is detail there that still has been worked through, but there's a massive amount of work already been undertaken. It has been worked through, but I just wanted to make the point that I do absolutely, I think we all recognise that there are other elements to this that we do need to look at the detail further on.
Mr Bourne.
Thanks, Provost. I don't normally speak on motions, but as there's no political divide, I feel I can on this one. I'm actually delighted to see the two aspects of this particular motion. Nursery education, we've noticed that we've received some really excellent reports inspectors' reports on some of our nurseries. The fact that these youngsters are going to benefit from what is outstanding I can't call it teaching, but child development that goes on in our nurseries certainly fills me with joy. I think it's absolutely brilliant. As far as the school meals are concerned, I mean, The whole issue of diet and healthy eating is something that is absolutely vital to the Scottish population. We're not famous for it, and I mean, the jokes abound, but it is actually very, very serious when we see some of the medical reports coming out. The idea that these youngsters will receive these lunches, and we know that they are balanced lunches, means at least at lunchtime they are receiving a balanced diet. So, as I say, I repeat myself, I'm delighted to see this motion. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Pass that by acclaim. Thank you. Item number 7, a review of committee and external appointments. A report by Mr Blair.
Thanks, Provost. Briefly, this report invites the Council to review committee and external appointments and also note the arrangements for the payment of senior councillors' allowances. Full details are set out in the main body of the report, and the clerks have already intimated there are papers being circulated, and today I'm seeking Council's instructions. Thanks, Provost.
Councillor Thompson.
I suppose firstly can I ask that the Council agree to suspend standing orders in order that we can simply agree to the block proposal that I'm going to put forward on the basis that there can be a further consideration of other elements of this, particularly from the Labour group at a future date. If the Council are happy to suspend standing orders to progress on that basis, then I'll move.
You happy? Okay.
On that basis, then, Provost, I think I've circulated the list of the SNP group proposed changes. There are also one or two notes in here where there's appointments where council representation is no longer sought, and these are highlighted in this report, and simply move the tabled report as a block proposal.
Councillor Constable.
Just a second, Provost.
Councillor Pottinger.
The ones that we've had submitted from the SNP group, where there's not a barra headline for that organisation, does that mean it's not to be included at all, or are you looking for maybe the Labour group to take up some of the other positions that are not included in it, or are we voting today just to make it that's only those committees only?
I'm simply moving the changes that are in the list. If there's other alternatives that the Labour group want to bring forward, happy to see that at a future date, and we'll support the mechanisms to make sure that we can make that happen as well.
Okay. Councillor Milligan.
Joe, this is just actually for clarity to make sure. The very last page, John, where you're saying you're adopting the proposal, the Deputy Provost will assume the chair of both general planning. I think you mean general purposes.
My sausage fingers and keyboards don't always go together.
Okay. Thank you. Item number 8 is the annual audit report from Grant Thornton, and we have Gary Devlin to present. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. Delighted to be here to present the annual audit report to the Council. Just a little bit of context to start on the report. So as what this is the culmination of all of our audit work. So it's a kind of a State of the Nation address from external audit, and it happens once a year. It covers the whole remit of external audit work, so that's not just the financial statements audit, it's around aspects of performance and governance, and we report in around all of our findings in relation to those matters. The other issue, a couple of issues I would highlight by way of background, is that the report was issued in October, and we're certainly conscious in further meetings since October we've had with the Chief Executive and with the Director of Finance that the position within the Council has moved significantly, I would say, in many of the issues that are raised in the report. And then just to talk about, without working through the report in detail, I'll just assume that members have read it and take questions at the end. So what is the message from external audit? Certainly the background is one that's affecting all public sector bodies around there being reductions in public funding, so there is a pressure on finances, at the same time as there is increasing demand for services, partly around demographics, for example, would be an example of that. What we're observing in Midlothian Council is that challenge is around the order of £13.5 million over a 3-year period. And the question we've been asking is how what plans are in place, explicit, detailed plans that demonstrate how the Council are going to get there. How are the Council going to deliver this level of savings, and how can we hold them to account to make sure that they're on track and on time in relation to that? The other area that we're highlighting is around some of the budget outturn performance during the year. So there was an overspend in the budget observed in the year. You can see what happens in relation to reserves, which is a transfer from the capital fund into the general fund. And what we're really pushing towards is, certainly the external audit view, that there needs to be more discipline around both managing the budget and managing the business transformation programme in order to ensure that there is some discipline around achieving the financial savings challenges that the Council faces. I guess we're raising a third issue around the pace of change. So one of the things we're looking at is for the Council to move faster in relation to how it puts in some of the transformation that's required to achieve those savings. If you don't front load some of those savings, then towards the end of the savings programme, you start to have to make quick decisions, and we'd like to see a Council that avoids doing that by planning early and having a clear path to delivering the Council where it needs to be. We're also highlighting areas of governance which we think works well in this Council. So we think the governance arrangements in a broad sense operate well, so audit are not saying there are any significant issues in relation to that. In relation to performance, well, there were some, in general the Council performs well in some areas. We're raising some areas of performance where we can see a decline. So for example, you see in the housing service, I think there are 4 areas where performance has gone down. And that partly reflects the ongoing review of that housing service. And within the single outcome agreement, we're seeing some issues raised around educational attainment, for example. And I know that that's something which is dear to the hearts of many councillors in the room. So we think that is something that's going to be an area for future attention and focus. And the things you would expect the auditor to be commenting on, well, we gave a clean bill of health to the accounts, and the Council's finance team did a good job of drawing the accounts together this year. We didn't identify any significant issues after an 8-week review and audit of the accounts, and that's a vote of confidence really in the finance team for the Council, and I probably would like to put that on record. I'll stop there. The Council has done a lot since this report was issued in terms of structuring the Council, in terms of looking again at the business transformation programme, and really addressing the action plan issues that we've had at the end. And that's the issue that the auditor will keep paying attention to over the coming year. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Dillon. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Gary for the report and welcome this report. It certainly is a marker of where we need to be and where we need to get to. I think it is important to highlight that this was a report produced in October based on the end of the previous financial year, because obviously there's a number of items on the agenda today that actually directly respond to some of the points it raised, such as meeting future challenges. We have the financial strategy report further in the agenda today. Turning to one or two of the specifics in the action plan to the report, also I would just want to make comment on them, because obviously there's some dates and timelines in there, such as under the first action in the action plan there on page 53 is talking about a financial strategy to be presented to the Council. That's here today. And the second recommendation there is saying that an update of a comprehensive review of risk management will be presented to Audit Committee in January. Audit Committee in January didn't actually meet, so that's obviously going to be the next meeting of the Audit Committee. And under the fourth recommendation and the outcomes from the best value audit, that's currently under consideration at the moment. So I think it's encouraging that there's about every action within the action plan already. There's action taking place, there's measures being taken, and certainly from my own point of view, I'm actually encouraged to hear our external auditors talk about the need for pace, because it's certainly anyone who's working with me knows that that's a sort of a call that I regularly make. I'm possibly impatient at times, but I like to see things moving fast. So I think we very much recognise the challenge, the financial challenge that lies ahead, but the fact that we're reporting in the financial reports today an underspend in the budget from last year certainly is quite a turnaround from the £2 million overspend in the previous year. So I'm encouraged, and again I welcome the report. It's always good to have a critical friend to work with us and help us in our progress to improving the Midlothian Council.
Thank you. Everyone happy with that one? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Devlin. Item number 9, Legacy 2014 and the Commonwealth Games 2014. Report by Mr. Blair.
Thanks, Provost. This report complements earlier items on today's agenda. The purpose of the report is to update Council on the arrangements being established to recognise Legacy Year 2014. I've set the background in section 2.1 of today's papers, and there are a number of major events in 2014, including the aforementioned Commonwealth Games. The report outlines the key elements, and in section 6 I've outlined the governance and managerial arrangements, and today Council has requested to note the recommendations set out in section 8 of today's papers. Thanks, Provost.
Councillor Rossi.
Thank you, Provost. I think this is a fantastic opportunity that we have to ensure that Midlothian benefits from the many events that are taking place in 2014. Projects such as the Midlothian Commonwealth Passport, which was launched in June last year. Now, this encourages young people to get involved in sport, and all Commonwealth sports are awarded 10 points, and in true Commonwealth spirit, young people can earn gold, silver or bronze medals. Special team tasked with bringing the Commonwealth Games legacy to Midlothian has been announced, and this team has been set up by the Council for the Games for Scotland project, and they will have a range of tasks involving music, dance and creative projects, and will work with schools, community groups and members of the public. All councils in Scotland have been allocated 2 Commonwealth countries to support over Pakistan and the Seychelles, and they've been chosen for Midlothian, and we should be supporting them after Scotland, of course. Woodburn Primary School are participating in a Commonwealth Games inspired culinary event, and with the help of the head of school meals at the school have dreamed up a recipe based on ingredients available in the Seychelles, and if they make it to the final they'll go head to head with other teams in a cook-off at the Cook School in Kilmarnock. Homecoming 2014 is another event that gives Midlothian an opportunity to highlight all we have to offer, such as in tourism, countryside and sports facilities, and I move that we accept the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Just really a question to John. I'm looking at all the villages that it's gone through, and there's no Danderhaw's on the map. And the reason I'm saying, not just because I come from Danderhaw, but there is somebody from Danderhaw who is representing Scotland at the Commonwealth Games. There is a primary school there, and I just wonder if you could maybe fit Danderhaw in with the car in the touch.
Yeah, in terms of the route shown on page 64, that's a proposed officer route. It would be subject to timings going to some of the outlying villages, and I think practically it would be difficult to take it through Danderhaw given the route, but I'll take it back to the Glasgow 2014 team and see if anything can be done. The intention is for the final event on the 16th of June to be held in the Dalkeith area, which is taking account of the closeness of Danderhaw.
Thanks, Provost. I was an ex-resident of Danderhaw. I can assure them it's still in the Commonwealth. I think we're okay. But in terms of the legacy, I mean, the legacies are actually quite difficult to measure. I mean, Midlothian's participation in it is, like my Councillor Rosie's, excellent. I'm really very much supportive of that. The legacy after the event is what use the facilities and different things get put to, and that is very, very difficult to measure. I mean, in London, I've had real problems with some of the facilities that have been left. And I know in Manchester, for the Commonwealth Games previously there, it's been exactly the same. In fact, in London, it's I think Spurs that are actually moving into the stadium. And in Manchester, it's Manchester City that moved into the Etihad Stadium there, as it's called now. We've not got that problem in Scotland because they're using Hampden and Parkhead, so they're already used there for the facilities. But I think the legacy, in terms of measuring the facilities and various things, it is actually very difficult to actually measure that. But in terms of the participation in Midlothian, as I outlined earlier, the more we can do, the more the better. And obviously some immediate support for this side as well. So.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. Just very happy to report to the Council that Clyde the mascot visited Midlothian yesterday, and I was happy to meet him along with pupils of St Luke's and Mayfield, and tremendous enthusiasm was shown by all the pupils, and they all wanted their picture taken with Clyde. Clyde. He's got a thistle for his head, and he wears size 17 shoes. Thank you.
We're happy to note the report and ask Mr Blair to go back to the Games organisers to see if they can include Dander Hall. Yeah? Thank you. Item number 10, self-directed support in Midlothian, a report by Joint Director of Health and Social Care. Evelyn.
Thank you, Provost. This report updates Council on plans for the implementation of self-directed support. In terms of background, Scottish Government published a strategy on the implementation of self-directed support in 2010, and that was followed by legislation in 2012. It's anticipated that the Act will come into force in April of this year. And there are a number of very significant changes that will take place as a consequence of this new legislation. It places new duties on councils in relation to how services are currently organised. Fundamentally, what the legislation seeks to do is to give people more choice about the services that they receive and how they are received, to give them more choice, but also to give them more control over how those services are arranged. And in effect, it requires councils to offer people 4 choices. The first one is really where people, and that's one we've got at the moment, is where people there's agreement on a number of services, and the council will then give the individual the resources to procure those services themselves. The second option that will be provided is where individuals will now direct the available support themselves. The third option is where the local authority can arrange the support, and fourth would be a mix of these options. For example, an individual might want to have what we would currently provide, a package of care to deliver their care every day, every week. But when it comes to respite, they might want to do something quite different, and they might want to use the resources to follow something that they know would be of benefit to them rather than use traditional services. The Act is also important because it gives powers to Council to support unpaid carers, and it also puts a duty on Council to make sure that we're helping people to fully realise the potential of this legislation, so that we're making sure that we're providing people with information and support to take control and to be empowered to direct services for themselves. But fundamentally, what it is, it's a shift in culture away from providing services to individuals to rather thinking about what individuals creatively, what will make a difference in people's lives, and then working with people around helping them to define how they will get those things, or how we will together organise those things that will make a difference. I mean, a very good example is something that we've got up and running at the moment, where we have a project called Wee Breaks. Traditionally, people who needed respite went into care homes, either in Midlothian or externally. But now people have opportunities to look at getting support to fund a holiday. We've had examples of folk getting funding to buy a hut so that they can spend a bit of time on their own in the back garden on a hobby or something. That's just one example, but it's very much more, rather than services fitting around individuals, more thinking about what are the things that will make a difference in individuals' lives. It's a very significant culture, but is one that we've been working very hard on, as members will be aware, in shifting the way that professionals interact and the way they work with individuals. The new legislation isn't just about adults and older people's care, it also applies to children's services as well. To some degree, children's services for people with disabilities will be already familiar with this working, but in other respects it'll be quite new to other aspects of children's services. In terms of resource, the legislation shouldn't require a change in terms of the resource that's available, but what it will do is it will bring in new ways of allocating resources. So for some individuals there may be differences either up or down, but it shouldn't affect the total resource that's required of the Council to fund individual needs. Funding's been provided by Scottish Government to support the development, the changes that were required in terms of systems and processes, and 420,000, and that money's been used for that purposes, but also for the training of staff. In terms of risk, obviously key is that we manage these changes positively, that we engage with people, and that they're used well to make a difference in people's lives. So strategies are in place to make sure that service users and carers are actively engaged at this stage in the planning of the changes. It should provide people with opportunities to be much more creative in terms of how services, how their needs are met. And the other area that we're working on as well is that with the increase of choice and control, there are traditional services out there that in the longer run people may choose not to use, and that includes both in-house services and commissioned services. So obviously we've been working with those services to help them make the necessary changes. Members are asked to consider the recommendations in section 5 of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. This report relates to important changes in the direction of health and social care, and it's one this administration supports. Self-directed support will allow people in receipt of care more control over the care they receive, and in supporting this choice we will place more focus on the outcomes achieved by such care. Care will be built up with flexibility around the needs of the individual rather than receiving traditional services. And we're also mindful that in delivering services in this way there will be an even greater focus on preventative spend and a move away from dependency on services, empowering people within the community. Whilst the principles are in place, we also know that there are risks which will require a fundamental shift, and I would ask the Director to explain to the Council the further work being undertaken with the Council and with external providers to ensure that they are each ready for the change in legislation.
Thank you. Within the Council itself, our approach has really been to work with staff to effect a shift in culture, because fundamentally for self-directed support to work, professionals need to recognise that individuals who need support are experts in their own needs. So it's about listening to people. It's about, rather than coming up with, I was going to say set pieces, but rather than coming up with pre-existing services, really exploring with individuals what is it that will help them perhaps to live with a lifelong mental health condition. What is it that will really help them, rather than assuming that the services that we've got out there are right for them, and then working with the individual to try and achieve what they want. So we've started first with shifting the culture in terms of the workforce, but the other areas where it's been really important is about working with the services themselves. And I have to say, in terms of external services, we have some services here in Midlothian that are already well down the road in terms of using an outcome focus. One, I think, which is a real exemplar of good practice is Vocal, and it hasn't been the Council teaching vocal how to do outcomes. It's been the council and vocal working together, sharing experience, working about how we support family carers together. Other examples of services where there's been excellent progress in this area, services for people with learning disabilities, where there's been a much longer tradition, I would say, than there has been in services for older people, and a much more personalised, flexible approach. So it's been one of learning and working together. There's been lots of, I guess, exploring the issues together, looking at what it means for services and making sure that services are ready for the changes.
Councillor John.
Thank you very much. I just move that we accept the recommendations and emphasise the need of why we all need to attend a seminar, and we all need to learn about this really well, because it's a new way of doing things, and we should all be focused on finding out the best way forward. Thank you.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, I'd welcome the seminar and I'll welcome the recommendations. But a lot of the things you're saying about self-directed support is talking about the opportunities and the choices. You know, I think there's more to it than just that. If your choices is unpaid carers, you know, then that's a choice you can make. Sometimes you want to make sure it's the appropriate carer. You know, it's not just a sports service. It's not just temporary. You know, we have to make sure that it's all done properly. We're not talking about a lot of there's no new money here. We're talking about people on their priorities. So if their priorities are for a project work, then there's less priorities for the weekly needs kind of work. And that's right, that person has got that choice to make. But we've all seen it when somebody's got to choose between maybe even a community alarm scheme or not. You know, a lot of these decisions are budget driven. You know, and they might say, well, that's a service I've not used for a while, so I might as well do without it. But you all have to have this insurance kind of backup, because we're thinking about if when things go wrong, you know, who's going to pick up the tab? You know, for these budgetary decisions that have been made. You know, that could also go wrong as well. So I just like to say there's some risks to this as well. It's not just all about opportunities and choices, but you know, we have to explore what the risks in this care service that will be.
Yes. In any service delivery or working with any group of service users, you're absolutely right. There are risks. There are risks around the individual's well-being, around their protection. I think in terms of this approach, it's also about being very open with individuals and knowing the thresholds around risks. And it's making sure that services and individual professionals are very clear around and very open with individuals around risk when individuals are choosing to take risks themselves. But also there may be occasions, and there will continue to be occasions, when there are risks that are inappropriate, and we will have statutory responsibilities to intervene or not to approve, because what will happen is individuals will have needs. They'll also bring strengths to that discussion, things they can do themselves, things they need assistance with. They will work out a plan with the worker, but ultimately that plan needs to be approved in terms of the budgetary allocation, but also in terms of the level of risk, whether there's risks that are acceptable and can be managed. In terms of budget, this legislation does not change the money that is available in terms of meeting needs. But what it will bring is a new system of allocating that money. And as I said, for some individuals it may mean that they have a higher allocation, but for some individuals it may mean that their allocation is slightly less. There is a gradual implementation. It will only be new people who are coming through the door with new needs in the first instance, and as I said, it's a choice that will be offered to people.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, it's fair to say that one of the biggest changes here is that we have a level of support to individuals based on the individual's needs rather than a more generic approach. And very much, I think, in paragraph 3.2, when we're talking about risks, we're also talking about creative ways of being able to work to meet the very specific needs that any individual might have. So it's very much more about person-centred rather than this is what happens to fit a larger picture.
Okay, happy to note the report and hold the seminar. Thank you. Item number 11, Midlothian Health and Social Care Partnership Progress, including financial scope. Report by Evelyn McHugh. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. This report seeks to update Midlothian Council on progress in relation to the Health and Social Care Partnership, but also seeks Council approval for the scope of the Council budget to be included in the resources to be delegated to the new partnership. There have been a number of reports to Council seeking approval of the establishment of the Shadow Board and more recently the appointment to the post of Joint Director. The legislation in relation to integration is making its way through Parliament and it's expected to pass through by April 2014. Now, during this year, each partnership will be tasked to develop what we're calling an integration plan, and that's a plan between the Council and the Health Board about the services, etc., that will be delegated to the partnership, but also the other piece of work is around a strategic commissioning plan, which is how we will use those resources and how we'll make a difference in terms of the services that are provided and how we meet needs over the next 3 years. The integration plan will be submitted to the Scottish Government in early 2015 for a formal approval. That's actually, this process is longer than we'd anticipated. I think when we originally, in the early papers, we were looking at the Shadow Board going live in April of this year. And because of that, we are seeking approval for the continuation of the current chairing arrangements for a further year so that we have continuity during this period of the lead-in to go live. The arrangements that had been approved before was that the NHS member would be chair for 1 year, then a council member, and what we're seeking is a change that instead the rotation would be on a 2-yearly basis to give us continuity during this period of fairly intensive preparation. The other area that in terms of scope for the partnership, all of our discussions up to now have been in relation to adults and older people. And in relation to criminal justice, we were very much pausing pending the outcome of the consultation in relation to criminal justice services, because at that point we weren't clear about whether there would be some national service for criminal justice social work or whether it would remain with councils. We now know from that consultation process that criminal justice will remain the responsibility of local authorities. Other Edinburgh and West Lothian are both including criminal justice in their partnership. East Lothian is also considering to do likewise. Locally here, criminal justice social work makes a very strong contribution to community safety, the community safety partnership, and it will be really important that it continues to do that, because the community safety and community planning terms addresses issues such as domestic violence, public protection, etc. So it's important that in terms of community planning, criminal justice continues to feed into those planning arrangements. But when we look at many of the issues faced by offenders, there's a very strong synergy between the work of the criminal justice team and services such as substance misuse and mental health services that will be managed by the partnership. So what we're proposing to do is to look towards including criminal justice in the partnership in order to capitalise on those synergies, but all continue to ensure that it has a very strong presence and leadership in the community safety area. The other area that we are looking at as well is in relation to children's services, and reference was made to this in the recent proposals around the restructuring, the restructuring of the management arrangements. As we move to the new arrangements, again, there's very strong recognition here of the very positive relationship between children's services and education and the absolute criticality of that continuing. But looking at how in the new partnership, again, children's health visitor, school nursing, GP practices, etc., will be in the partnership, and again looking at the synergies there with children's services. So what we are proposing that consideration should be given to is looking at children's services joining the partnership in a phase 2, and we are looking at it as a phase 2 in order to give us the time to do it well and to ensure that we maintain the good working relationships and the good networks that exist already, so that it actually enhances children's services rather than in any way being a distraction to the work that's happening at the moment. The other area that the Shadow Board is looking at is there are many NHS Lothian-wide services that are delivered to our community locally, and a lot of dialogue going on around how which ones is critical are retained at an NHS level, and what services are there that might benefit from being more local, integrated more locally with services. I mean, an example is the NHS Substance Misuse Service that would really benefit from much closer working with areas such as housing, social work, etc. locally. But joint resourcing is key to the plans for integration, and work is ongoing across NHS Lothian, but also there's a lot of activity in the Scottish Parliament around developing the right financial frameworks to allow the joint plans for joint resourcing to be progressed. The proposals outlined in this report regarding the financial scope of the partnership have been discussed and agreed in principle by both the Shadow Board here in Midlothian and NHS Lothian. It's recognised there's fundamental differences in how we manage financial resources in NHS and within the Council, like VAT is treated differently, there's different arrangements in relation to how capital funding is accessed, also access to services. People access to social care services is determined by eligibility based on need, and also individuals, depending on the resources they have available to them, contribute towards the cost of their services, whereas all NHS services are free at the point of delivery. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done around these areas. And as I said, that is subject to consideration both at an NHS Lothian level but also at a national level. Appendix 1 outlines the proposed element of the Council's adult health and social care that it's proposed would go into the partnership, and there's also an outline of the NHS services that will go into the partnership in the first instance, and those are primarily the ones that are currently managed within the CHP, the local CHP, and the CHP has governance over. In terms of risk, both the CHP and the Council, the processes are currently subject to their separate risk arrangements, but work is underway to create a more joined-up approach to the management of risks across both systems. The joint financial framework will be absolutely key to making sure that we have good arrangements in place to manage the risks around funding across health and social care services. Members are asked to consider the recommendations in section 7 of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. I would seek to support the recommendations set out in this paper. There's a strong commitment within the administration on addressing health inequalities which prevail in our communities, and by working in partnership with health, we have the best possible chance of doing so. Partnership will afford strengthened primary care, which in turn should lead to lessened requirement for acute intervention. In working together, there will be a more inclusive approach to working with our more vulnerable in society, including those in the criminal justice system, who we know are often faced with mental health and substance misuse issues, which in partnership with health we will be able to address more effectively.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, welcome your report, Evelyn, and the much work that's been getting done on this issue, to get the integration. I know timetables are difficult, and and that's outside your own hands on many occasions. You've listed in Appendix 1 criminal justice, and you've made reference to it. And I think what we're saying is that when criminal justice comes up for discussions at that it could be included, in the actual partnership. And personally speaking, I wouldn't have any qualms about it being included, but I'd rather just leave it just now as it could be included. And subsequently, we go on to the other issue, that's at the recommendation E. We agree in principle at appropriate time in the future children's services should be included in the partnership. Again, I'd just like to move a wee amendment to that, to put that word back to could be included, and it gives us a little bit more flexibility in taking these issues forward with the agenda. And there's no other problems with this. There's a lot of work getting done here, and from the NHS and from social care side. And I appreciate there's a lot to get done to get it fully integrated. But yes, the plan is good, and it's going forward. And I'll just propose that one slight change in the grammar.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. As a member of the board, I would like to second Cath's proposal and agree, for the sake of a word, the amendment from Labour I would find acceptable. Though I think children's services should be included, but we'll accept the word.
Happy to accept the recommendation as amended. Thank you. Item number 12, Welfare Reform Review 2013, report by Evelyn McHugh.
Thank you, Provost. This report seeks to update Council on the impact of the implementation of welfare reform and the actions that's been taken up to now to mitigate that impact, but also the continuing risks presented to Council and to our local community. Just to recap, there's three main elements to the welfare reform changes. We've got transitions involving the replacement of existing benefits by another benefit, a number of reductions in benefit entitlements, and also we've had benefits that previously had been administered nationally are now administered more locally here in Midlothian. The Appendix 1 has an outline of progress in relation to those changes, but I would remind members that we're at the very early stage of implementation of the PIP, and also there's still uncertainty about the rollout of universal credit. At the moment, indications are 2015, but obviously members will know from national publicity that there's continuing uncertainty about that because of the feedback from pilots that are underway. And just to look at the individual changes, obviously the one in relation to under-occupancy has been a major concern to us here in the Council, and members will be aware of the work that was undertaken prior to implementation in terms of identifying individuals, providing support and making sure we were providing people with as much information as we could in relation to the impact that that would have on individuals. In Midlothian, there's 1,200 claimants affected. 800 of those are council tenants, and the other 400 are tenants of the RSLs locally. The increase in rent arrears from December 12 to December 13, that's over 1 year, went from 813,000 to 1,103,000. So the level, and a very significant increase in the number of tenants in what we call serious arrears. So again, the detail of that is outlined in the report. The other group who are particularly affected by the changes are households in temporary accommodation, and the Council agreed last year to freeze rents and service charges on temporary accommodation to avoid more people going into arrears, and this report seeks a continuation of that position. Also last year, Council moved to agree an eviction policy on rent debt resulting from under-occupancy charge, and it was agreed that where all reasonable efforts had been made by tenants to meet their responsibilities, and where the sole cause of the arrears was the under-occupancy charge, then for a period of a year the Council would not move to evict. An important component of managing the under-occupancy charge is the discretionary housing benefit. I mean, this payment in the past was not designed to be used for under-occupancy. Rather, it was funding that we had available to support people where they needed a deposit for housing, or they needed additional funding to help in cases of hardship. But obviously, in the current circumstances, it's been used primarily to manage the under-occupancy charge. There's been a significant increase in the amount of money that's been made available. The details contained there in the report, where the increased to over 300,000, and we've also had 398,000, and there's been a further award of 40,000 from DWP, and we've applied for another addition from DWP. We're actively working using that money to try and reduce the number of people who are being charged with under-occupancy currently. In terms of the benefit cap, it was implemented in July of last year, and again there are 50 households that have been affected by that, and again we're looking to provide what support we can to those individuals where that's been imposed on them. The other change that occurred was the Social Welfare Fund, and the Council has responsibility for the administration of the fund. As members are aware, the fund has two components. One is the crisis loans, which are available to provide a safety net where individuals are experiencing a level of hardship that brings an immediate threat to individuals' health and safety. And the other one is to support people to live independently in the community. That's a community care grant to avoid institutional care. Prior to the introduction, revenues section within the Council worked extremely hard, very tight timeline really to get the service up and running, and I have to say really did an excellent job in terms of being ready for the administration of the service. Locally, our experience was similar to that nationally. The first 6 months we were looking at an underspend. There's been work that's gone on nationally reviewing the eligibility criteria, and we've now reached a position where we're on an even keel in terms of the money that's available and the expenditure. Two important components of this work has been the work that's been done by the contact centre in receiving calls. Although there's been a lot of pressure on the contact centre as a direct result of this, and there's work going on at the moment reviewing the staff in the contact centre, the first priority was all of these calls that were coming in seeking access to the Social Welfare Fund. So as a service, there's been a good response in terms of responding to those calls. The other important piece of work is around the partnership with Mark, where people who are eligible for community care grants have been able to access furniture and other goods from Mark. And as a result of that, because they've been much more cost effective, and it's allowed people, their money's gone further in terms of the goods they've been able to purchase, as well as supporting a local social enterprise that's supporting people into training and employment. So that's been an important development. The paragraph 2.6 highlights the whole range of mitigating activities that have happened in terms of the impact on individuals and their families within the community. The former Fairs Scotland funding was reprioritised to ensure that priority was given to addressing people in hardship. The other important piece of work was the work that was done in partnership with MFIN around accessing external funding, and we've got 450,000 extra money coming in to deliver services locally. We have also seen a real strengthening of activity across the voluntary and community sector and the churches. A lot of activity happening, but I think what's probably been most important, and if there's any positives to be drawn from the difficult situation that we are in, it's the level of partnership working that we're seeing between services here in Midlothian and the voluntary sector and the churches. There's a level of, prior to welfare reform, the landscape was more fragmented than we would have wanted to see. But what we're seeing now is a coming together of services, actively working together, and a real recognition that many of the people who are being impacted on by welfare reform, it isn't just that they have a problem with rents, there's also likely to be other debts, there's likely to be problems in relation to fuel bills, there's likely to be difficulties in terms of just managing all other aspects of the household budget. So there's been a new project that's been set up called March that's really working with all the services to make sure that we're providing a much more coordinated approach in our response. And I would have to say that's been an area of real strength in the developments that's happened. As I've said earlier, we've seen a very significant increase in rent arrears with an annual cost of 728,000, with a very negative impact on the housing revenue account. And it's estimated that this level will stay the same for 14-15. But again, we are looking at the implementation of universal credit, which is likely to cause a further deterioration in this situation. The pilots, the early results from the pilots that are being run is showing that despite very intensive activity, that there's still very significant increases in rent arrears likely to arise from the introduction of universal credit. One of the areas that's been, again, where we've managed to do some work in relation to mitigating the impact is a very intensive approach from revenue officers, but also in relation to our homeless service, our contract with Places for People. They're working very proactively with our tenants, and we are seeing a reduction in rent arrears through their interventions, and that's really about benefits checks, etc., and making sure that people are entitled to everything possible. We are in this report again seeking to increase that service further by employing additional resources from Places to People. Homelessness, we've seen there was comments already on performance in relation to housing, but we've seen a deteriorating situation in relation to homeless, where more people are needing to stay in homeless accommodation longer because we don't have enough suitable properties for them to move on to. The risks are highlighted in paragraph 3.2. Again, it's about our capacity to support individuals who are affected by it. It's the challenges around our housing provision. It's the impact that it's having in terms of other services across the council and demands on services. And it's also the continuing challenge we're facing in relation to the introduction of universal credit, but also the continuing significant impact on revenue collection. Universal credit will include a housing element to replace housing benefit and shall be paid monthly directly to the tenant, who will then be responsible for paying the rent. So again, we are likely to see a worsening of the situation because of that. The other area that members will be aware of, where we are working on, is in relation to looking at exploring the opportunities to develop a new service locally called Grand Central Savings that would provide more support to individuals who are struggling financially, but we're at the early stages of exploring how that might be provided locally. I'm happy to respond to any further questions, and the recommendations of the report are contained in paragraph 5.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks, Evelyn. I think, again, we've got a very detailed report here that lays bare the facts of the impact of the welfare reform agenda. I think this chamber has been united in our approach and saying it is absolutely the wrong approach for the UK government to take in the measures that they're trying to implement. We already know the impact it's having on individuals, and today we're getting the latest update on the impact on the council. You just look at page 83 in rent arrears, when already the annual cost is to this council £728,000, and once we've got universal credit introduced, we're looking at £2 million a year that we're not going to be collecting in as a direct result of measures implemented by the UK government. I think we know that we don't want it. We're very, very limited to what we can do. We simply can't say we don't want them to do it. We just don't have the power to do that. And we're left to mitigate where possible. And obviously, steps are being taken. Currently, the Scottish Government are putting the maximum legal amount into supporting discretionary housing payments, and I know that there's ongoing discussions about how that can be increased, and certainly an approach has been made to the UK Government to say, can that be topped up to the 50 million that I know that the Labour group in Holyrood are asking for, although that doesn't yet appear to be meeting with favour from Westminster. But it doesn't take away from the fact that's still only mitigating the impacts of a number of these measures. It doesn't stop them. The funding still has to come from somewhere while this is in place. Evelyn did mention the fact that a year ago we agreed a non-eviction policy on arrears as a result of the bedroom tax. We agreed that for a period of a year on the basis we were expecting the universal credit to be being introduced now. Can I perhaps suggest that as an additional recommendation we extend that policy of non-evictions to the point where universal credit is actually being introduced, and then we can review it again at that stage. But at this current point, none of the reasons for us introducing it then have changed, because universal credit has been delayed, and I would ask the Council to support a move to extend that policy of non-evictions until such time as we have a clearer picture on what's happening there. Other than that, I would simply ask the Council to agree the other recommendations in the report. I think we need to continue to argue against these measures wherever we can and however we can, but as I say, it is unfortunate we're so limited to what we can do to actually stop them.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
I just second Owen's recommendation to accept. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Provost. It's really part of the paper. It's a detailed report. I'm not going to. Evelyn's covered it adequately, but it's on the regeneration of the welfare rights team, Evelyn, and I know for a fact that they are stretched. We're going to appeals and tribunals. Nicole and Ben. there's a lot of work involved, and I don't know if it would be appropriate or if there's funding available to employ another welfare rights officer, because a few years ago we did have 3 welfare rights teams, but there's other partnerships out there that we could and should be working with. And the Coal Industry Social Welfare Organisation, there's 3 welfare workers. Everybody thinks they're for miners, or no, they're for mining communities, and I use them quite a lot to summit, because there are a lot of people, elderly people, who, because they've got a pension, didn't think they're entitled to attendance allowance, and they get it. They get it because of disability. It doesn't matter if you're a millionaire, you qualify. And that's a message that we really need to get out, because a lot of people, especially older people who are over 65, would be better off. So I've mentioned it to Nicole, and I can't remember the last time I had a welfare meeting. You weren't there on, by the way, you were absent. But certainly I've spoken to the welfare team, the head welfare officer for the Coal Industry Social Welfare Organisation. They're quite happy to work with the welfare teams in the council. And also, because of this, there's a lot of ex-miners, miners, widows. They get access to the coal fund. But if they need, say, I don't know, say, a new washing machine, they'll get up to £500 towards a washing machine if they're not got much money. So that could be utilised also to help the people in the Midlothian area.
Shall I respond to that? Thank you. What we're doing is we're looking at what we did last year. Is our senior welfare rights officer moved out of doing appeals work really to do a lot of the coordination. We did a temporary replacement of that. What we're doing at the moment is we're reviewing where the demand is across the system and how we can best allocate it. There's a lot of additional resources have come in, like that 450,000 is all additional, and we have an additional welfare rights officer in there with that in the council. So, and as I said, we were also looking at the places for people intervention is particularly effective in relation to folk with housing difficulties. The support that you're referring to, it's our income maximisation officers who are based with the field work, who are doing most of the work with older people. So I'll make sure that they're well connected into the trust that you're referring to, because they're the ones who are doing most of the activity with older people. But as our proposal at this stage is that we are looking for additional resource in relation to benefits to add to the amount that we've managed to take in from elsewhere, but we're looking to focus that on people with housing difficulties, and we're also looking at our senior welfare rights officer potentially starting to take on tribunals again. But we're just doing a piece of work around reviewing where we've got our resources, and we will come back with a request for more resources if that's the outcome of that piece of work.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, I totally welcome the detailed report. You know, it's a lot of shifting sands in this welfare reform, and you've kept us fully updated on much of the detail. We've also had successful project work as well, grants, and I think you made a wee bit of reference to it. But you know, the risks are always there. I mean, the risk was there for day one. We didn't have enough housing, you know, to deal with the issues. We didn't have enough individual support or capacity, so anything that can be done to help that individual support or capacity. But there's a need there to advertise it. So as soon as you advertise it, it could actually become oversubscribed, you know, because you know the level of people wanting that kind of individual support. When we tried to bring Capital Credit Union as a player here, but they didn't have the resources to support us on it. And a meeting at COSLA, I learned about the Grand Central Savings involvement with the City of Glasgow Council. It's good that you've given us all this and the detailed stuff about the discussion of housing payments. Now, the crisis loans and the crisis grants were always under the belief, and I presume the practicality of being expired. You know, that have been very much budget. You know, get in early or you'll not get it. You know, because it would never last the full financial year. And the discussion of housing payments, it's good that we've been getting more money into that fund. And when I looked at Midlothian's application form for discretionary housing payment, it's a lot more user-friendly than our neighbours in Edinburgh, on the discretionary housing payment form, and I really think that's very much appreciated, that we're doing this, and the discretionary powers that we can actually use in that, I think, have been well used, to actually to align more of the discretionary housing payment budgets out into the community, and I encourage you to continue to be proactive on that agenda as well, and I totally welcome the report, and thank you very much for the update and the detailed information.
Councillor Mulligan.
Provost, welcome everything that's been said, but I'd like maybe a wee bit more clarity in Owen's motion to extend the no eviction policy for a further year. And just what we clarified on what we're agreeing here is that we're agreeing to no evict. And I don't know how we do it on a year basis. I think we should just simply agree that anybody who is in arrears because of the bedroom tax and affordability, this council will do everything other than evict them, and we need to be sure that also means is that when the debt gets to a reasonable height, it's then no referred on to a debt collection agency, so we actually find out that we're biting ourselves to make sure that that's there. And I'm kind of wary with saying that it's for a period of time. I mean, if you look at, for example, the poll tax, or the dreaded poll tax, everybody, including myself, hands up, telling folk didn't pay it, protest, didn't pay it. At the end of the day, what folk were then faced with was this big massive bill at the end, and indeed many councils, including this one, still pursuing people for their payments. So it's just to sort of see where we're going to go with it. We didn't want to get to the end of yet another year and then find out that we're no evicting folk, and quite rightly, because they can't afford to pay something. And it's making sure that the message is clear there. It is only for people who are affected by the bedroom tax and because of affordability, because this council, quite rightly in my view, bought hardly any one-bedroom houses. We gave people a small price, an additional bedroom so that they could have grandchildren, family across to visit, and it stopped young people just getting married, going into a one-bedroom house, and then when they decided to have a family having to skip houses. So we have an array of people who are in two-bedroom houses that will be falling into this penalty through what was effectively our policies. And because I don't think anybody could ever see any government of any kind actually saying to somebody, well, you're poor, so you're not entitled to spare bedroom or a bedroom for your grandchildren or your children if you're separated to come to. So I think we need to be really clear, very publicly clear as to what we're proposing here, and I would suspect it will be along the lines that I've been talking about, but just if one could confirm that.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially it's exactly the policy we currently have, extended. I didn't say for a year, I said until introduction of universal credit, because that does seem to be moving, and at that point I think we need to review it to see what we need to do to take account of any changes there. It's exactly the same policy we've had. It's only due to the affordability on the bedroom tax, where all other reasonable efforts have been made to pay debts, and it's absolutely the same policy we currently operate, simply that I was very conscious that last year we agreed it for a year because we thought universal credit was coming in now. So given that it's now run out, I think it's appropriate we extend that. And I think it gives us that opportunity then to look at how we work it when universal credit finally does hit us. If it is later this year then, or whenever that finally does come. If we simply extend it to the introduction of that, it gives that element of flexibility to look at it.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, we've always had a policy of new evictions until it becomes critical. Right? The critical amount doesn't happen on the bedroom tax till a year's worth accumulated arrears. When it becomes critical is the time that we can consider an eviction. So basically everybody's got a year anyway.
And about the amount, it's about the bedroom tax, and it's a policy we agreed last year. So and we've not actually we've never had a policy on no evictions before. So I think just to be clear on that, this is a very specific element as a result of the bedroom tax that we all agreed last year for a period of a year, and this is an extension of it.
Just that was the legal advice from Hillary at the time.
You want to respond? Councillor Pottinger, you...
I think Owen's right. There's never been a no eviction policy prior to the introduction of this one specifically to do with the bedroom tax, and this was for that very specific reason where all other efforts have been exhausted. I think what you're maybe referring to is in the past we've always tried every other possible way of avoiding having to go down the eviction route, but ultimately where there was no alternative and where people maybe weren't engaging with us or weren't accepting the advice and the assistance that we could offer, then ultimately we had no choice but to look at eviction. But there was never a formal sort of no eviction policy previously.
I know that, but the advice was, it's not critical till the debt gets to a certain level. Then it becomes critical. Then we start looking at collection means and robust collection means, if I can just phrase it as that. And if it was just solely based on arrears built up because of the unpaid benefit for the under occupancy charge, the unpaid monies to the council, that would take at least a year to accumulate to a critical level. So it was an unwritten kind of administrative kind of ruling, that somebody obviously wouldn't be evicted till it became critical. But the policy is right. It's come in. No evictions on the basis of bedroom tax. But just defining that it's an operational reasons. There's always been that kind of year's kind of grace.
Yeah, if I can just respond a little bit again. It's not so much a year's grace, but I know what you mean. In terms of the time that it would take somebody to accumulate a debt that would be of a sufficient level that it would be looked at in court, it would take a number of months before somebody could accrue that. It would depend very much on the size of property that they were in and whether they were restricted by the 14% or the 25%, and ultimately we would still go down the route of issuing them with the standard reminder notices and the notice of proceedings, etc. But normally we wouldn't be able to take a case to court until it had accrued a certain level of debt. Not a specific amount, but where we would feel it was appropriate to take it to court. Otherwise, it simply wouldn't be even looked at in court. It's not necessarily a year's grace, but I know what you mean. It would take a time to build that.
Councillor Thompson.
I think it's alongside the non-eviction policy. There's clearly extensive work being undertaken to work with our tenants, particularly those who are impacted by the bedroom tax. We know that that's there, so there's a lot of work happening alongside this, but I think it's absolutely, let's come back to the point, it's absolutely appropriate. We agreed last year the principles of this. We've run out of time essentially from the policy we agreed. Now we just extend it. I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that.
Okay, we're happy to accept the recommendations as amended. Okay, thank you. Item number 13, review of fees and charges, report by Mr Blair.
Thanks, Provost. The Council agreed at the December meeting to establish a cross-party working group to examine the proposals in detail relating to revisions to fees and charges and to report back to Council. I'm pleased to advise Council that the group has met twice and agreed to separate what we're classifying as the commercial charges from the community facility charges, recognising the need to standardise charges across the Council's community facilities estate. Accordingly, this report outlines proposed revisions to the charges, and these are detailed in the appendix of today's papers. And Council are invited to consider the recommendations as detailed, and note a further report will be submitted to the Council either at the next meeting or the May meeting of the Council following further meetings of the working group. Specific further meetings of the working group will look at the need to standardise charges across like facilities within the Council, which is a clear remit have been given. Accordingly, today, Council, you're asked to consider the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Councillor Rosie.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Just to say that there is going to be a consultation process in this, and that will come before Council, hopefully, as Mr Blair said, either March or when. The consultation process is vitally important, and we have to encourage all the interested parties, and that's internal and external, to participate in the process. And in that vein, I would just move the report be accepted. Thank you.
Councillor Milligan.
Chairman, thank you. There has been some good work done within the working group to get this here. However, as you all expect, we'll not always agree by the time we get here. We would like to move an amendment to some of the areas, very few to be honest. Mostly it's compliant to what I would call as the replacement for the Gardening Assistance Programme on page 96, and that's for the top gardening, where all the way down we start off at 7%, right until we get to hedge cutting, where we go up to a 50% increase, right down to where you get to the bottom, where you could actually see a rise for £460 to have your hedge cut, I think twice yearly, up to £690. We don't think there's a need to put these humongous rises on, which is really a replacement to what was the Gardening Assistance Programme. We knew it wouldn't make money or even break even when we put it in. However, it was there to try and help those people who weren't able, in fact, to be able to do their own gardens, keep their gardens tidy. So we would move these increases move with the rest of them with the rate of inflation, and the rate of inflation only. We would also move that in the telecare and the community alarm scheme, where we would have preferred this charge to be taken out, but however that was at last council and therefore time barred for me to move that we remove it. Therefore we would move absolutely no increase in the charges to that. On a couple of points that I think are worth talking to here, I think we need to do a lot of work doing Ricky Moffat's side. You see in later papers a failure to get the income we were looking for residual waste for trade. I think we need to explain and let the businesses and Small Business Federation be aware of why there's a 10% rise into the residual collection for trade. And I think most of the figures, if my memory serves me right, for what we've been given, are due to the fact that the landfill tax increases rather than anything else. That's why year on year that figure's way above inflation and way above everything else, and that's quite simply because the landfill tax that's applied to there keeps going up well above inflation. So for the council just to run at a level cost, that's why you have the big rises. They're no welcome at this time, but unfortunately they're the only way the council can get the money back. And just one matter which is under on page 98, which is the blue badge. It has their statutory charge, no charge. Sorry, I missed that at the meeting. I'm not actually sure what that means, because it seems...
No changes.
Is it no change? Sorry, I've written over the top of it. Sorry. I was... On the blue badge stuff, one of the things I will make is that when you were in opposition, you did promise to remove that charge, and on several occasions, if my memory serves me right, you tabled motions asking us to remove it. So I'm surprised it's still in there. Anyhow, the two amendments that I would like to make effectively is the telecare with no increase, and the Gardening Assistance Programme with rate inflation increases only.
Councillor Thompson.
Can I maybe just ask what the view of the working group was on the proposals we've just heard? Obviously there's been a forum where this could be discussed, so was there any kind of indication of whether the working group that we established across the council were supportive of these proposals?
Yeah, Provost. Yeah, these were seen as built-in, non-controversial, for want of a better word, to allow these to come forward. These were seen as commercial decisions. The rest of the decisions that we're doing there were sort of about levelling up charges through sport and leisure and education, and were about how we were going to enter free lets in that. And they were seen as the main controversial areas where you would get some negotiation. I did quite clearly say when this was here, while I agreed with going forward, there were maybe some charges that the Labour group would not agree with on these issues, and I think I was quite clear enough at that meeting.
Councillor Thompson.
So, I mean, so essentially we've not, this is a first, I'm not trying to be smart about this, I'm just trying to be clear. So this is the first airing, essentially, of this amendment. It's not been discussed at the working group. Right, okay. I mean, obviously it does occur to me that what we're talking here is a number of figures that have to go out to consultation. So whether we say that they're the level that's in the report now, or whether we say they're 33 times that or 1,000 times that, we're going out to consultation and to gather the views of users. I think perhaps I would be inclined to say we keep with what's in the report, given that it's actually to go to a wide-ranging consultation, because it's after that consultation process where we've heard the views of users, public, in our communities, that will finally form an opinion on this, and perhaps that gives the manoeuvrability, I think, that perhaps Councillor Milligan's looking for around some of these issues, and perhaps might even allow for some flexibility in some of the discussion around this and let us get to a sensible position.
Mr Blair.
Just in terms of the consultation, required to advise Council that I dropped a letter to the Federation of Small Business Organisations in Midlothian, letting them know the paper was going to Council today, and it would be my intention to follow that up after today's meeting.
Councillor Muirhead.
Provost, I'm afraid I do agree with Owen's point here. You know, there's consultation, which is fair enough, but I think we've got a duty to actually, as a council, put forward what we think the right levels of these things are for people to make a judgment on. And I think it's quite legitimate for us to say that we think that these particular charges are wrong and that we should amend it prior to it going out to consultation. I don't think we wait. Consultation is not just about, you know, going out to people and say, you tell us what you want us to do. We've got a duty to actually tell them what we think is necessary. So I think we should, in doing so, second Derek's proposal there. But I think we should amend them prior to them going out for consultation.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. I'm not sure that we're armed with enough information to be able to make a definitive decision on particular charges. You know, if you go back to the hedge cutting, for instance, perhaps the revised charges reflect more closely the cost to the council of actually doing the work. So I would be a bit uncomfortable about us making decisions. And on that specific point, I'd like to know whether the revised hedge cutting costs or the existing ones more closely reflect the cost to the council.
Mr Blair.
In terms of the specifics of hedge cutting, the proposed 50% increase does reflect the cost of providing that service.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. I would move that, Councillor Roti, in moving the paper as it stands. The hedge cutting charges, we have discussions when I held that portfolio whether that service should continue at all. Should the council be in the business of cutting hedges, and especially to say at a subsidised rate? There are many local companies doing that service for people, and I don't think we should be going around the business around cutting them. I would be happy for the positions to stay as they are. As regards to telecharges, they are benchmarked well with other authorities, including of all different parties. We are not overcharging in that respect at all, and therefore I would move the paper as it stands.
Okay, we have an amendment to the recommendations. Those in favour of the amendment, please show. Those in favour of the recommendations, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Recommendations are accepted. Thank you. Move to item number 14, Community Covenant and UK Armed Forces within Midlothian. I'm quite happy to to move the recommendations on this. The Scottish Government recognises that Scotland owes a tremendous debt of gratitude to those who serve in the armed forces. And in keeping with our commitment to the Community Covenant, I propose that we offer corporate rates to members of the armed forces and their families who will be eligible for a discounted membership when they sign up to Midlothian Council's fitness and leisure centres, and offer 2, 3 and 4 month only memberships to service personnel to recognise the nature of armed forces deployments. Councillor Montgomery.
I don't know if I can second you or not. You might have somebody in the group, but I mean, I would certainly support it. And I think, when I was the provost, I did sign the Community Covenant. I think you'll be the representative now. I think that's a great idea. It's an extension of the what we've already done with armed forces. There have been some grants came to Midlothian already, and I think we do give extra housing points to armed forces personnel, which I think someone, I do agree with. The only thing I would say, and I think Councillor Coventry mentioned a bit about the SNP government and all the rest of it. I just wonder where this would go after the 18th of September if we do actually decide to go independent, because it's the UK armed forces that we're actually supporting here, and whatever will happen after that. But I don't want to take away from what we're actually doing here. I mean, I do agree with this, and I think it's a very good idea.
I'm quite happy you accept it as my seconder. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I can't help myself. No, obviously at the moment it's the UK Armed Forces, of which Scotland contributes a massive amount to, so in independent Scotland will have our share of what is the currently UK forces. It's quite simple, really.
Councillor Coventry.
Yeah, I think it should be noted that the UK Armed Forces, personally I think it's disgraceful. I think it was between 20 and 30% of those coming back from Afghanistan are facing redundancy under the UK Armed Forces. Under an independent Scottish Armed Force, we'd be recruiting.
Okay. Is that accepted? Thank you very much. We move to item number 15, the Bonnyrigg Leisure Centre Update Report, a report by Mary Smith, Director of Education, Communities and Economy.
Thank you, Provost. This report provides an update regarding the proposals for the use of the former Bonnyrigg Leisure Centre. Section 2.1 to 2.3 outlines the background to this report, and Section 2.4 gives an update which we've had to take into account in terms of the Community Empowerment Bill, although that's in draft at the moment. But elsewhere on the agenda, item 15, we had to give an update to that consultation. Section 3 outlines the current position, where by the 6th of January we had received 2 submissions for Bonnyrigg Leisure Centre premises, the Bonnyrigg Leisure Trust and the Bonnyrigg Fitness Academy. Assessment panel had been set up and it comprised of the Council's Head of Finance, our Head of Property and Facilities Management, our Head of Communities and Economy, and we had an Associate Director of NHS Lothian in her capacity as our Community Planning Partner. The panel was asked to undertake a thorough assessment of the submitted bids, including, as may be necessary, seeking further information and clarification from each bidder. And we're doing that at the moment, and we will have a report for the next meeting on the 25th of March, where we will have concluded all of that assessment panel. Section 5 outlines a recommendation that the Council notes the responses to the formal offer, that 2 bids have been received, to instruct that a full report on the assessment of these bids be submitted to Council on the 25th of March, and approve a supplementary estimate of £7,000 in respect of the additional maintenance costs for the former Bonnyrigg Leisure Centre.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. It's beginning to feel honorary leisure on the Council again. It sounds like Groundhog Day, but to be serious, we've got 2 bids in. It's a shame it's taking us long to do it, but it's very important that we get it right, and we'll look forward to the full assessment in March. I'm glad to note the composition of the assessment panel. I'm sure we can all have every confidence in it, and we hope they will come to the right decisions, which we await. It's just, I've gone down one route saying to people that we will be deciding it today, but of course has to go on. Recommendation 3 is regrettable but necessary. It will be important to get the thing right.
Okay, happy to accept the recommendations. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I agree with much of Councillor Constable said there. I'd just like to ask a question, really, of the Director. What kind of input will you be expecting from outside organisations? I'm thinking of particularly organisations like Development Trust Association for Scotland, who must have had an enormous amount of experience of situations like this and will intuitively know which kind of models work, which kind of models don't work, and give us advice on where the risks really lie.
I'll pass that on to my colleague, Ian, behind me, I hope. I've not looked round. Who's there?
Thanks, Provost. In terms of that particular question, what the panel are doing is they are assessing the bids that have come in. Clearly, there's a whole series of other factors which I mentioned here in the report, not the least of which is some of the issues that have come out through some of the consultation process on the neighbourhood planning exercise, which has been well publicised. Also, the terms of the draft Community Empowerment Bill. So they're factors, not overriding, but they're factors to be taken into account. If during the course of the assessment there is a view from the panel that it needs further information in relation to trusts or whatever, then there's nothing to stop the panel going ahead and seeking that further information. But what we're aiming to do, obviously, is to have the fullest of reports before you come the 25th of March.
Thank you. Is that acceptable? Thank you very much. Move to item number 16, Revenue Budget 2014-15, a report by Mr Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, this report provides a final update on the budget for next financial year and presents the final service budget by individual services for approval. Table 4 on page 115 of the agenda sets out the final budget position, which results in a small reinstatement of reserves of £34,000. Appendix 1 on page 118 summaриses the budget by each of the services based on the previous management structure. Provost, today I'm asking Council to approve the 14-15 revenue budget as summarised in Appendix 1.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
I'll be very brief, Provost. I think we've had a good going over the budget at the last council meeting. This really is, as Gary says, the final position for the year. It's encouraging that we're able to reinstate reserves to some extent, and obviously there continues to be more work to be done, but puts us in a good place for the year ahead.
Thank you. Council happy to accept the recommendation. Thank you. Do members wish to have a 10-minute recess? We still have a few items on the agenda to go. Quite happy to keep going on, but if you're would like a break? Yep, okay, thank you.